The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, along with former Oshkosh Mayor and City Councilwoman Melanie Bloechl. There's currently a movement in Oshkosh to ban smoking in Oshkosh restaurants. It's being proposed and moved forward by a group named Breathe Free Oshkosh. And we are very pleased this evening to welcome Propp and Joe Cismoski. I'm pronouncing that correctly, right? Both members of Breathe Free Oshkosh, and we thank you very much for being here tonight to talk about the issue. Why don't we start by you sharing with viewers a little bit about your group, just a brief history of it, and we want to get into the specifics of the ordinance that's being proposed, so forth, a little bit later. But let's talk a little bit about the group and how you got formed and what the history of it is.
Well, Joe, you can do a better job of this than I can. I think the group's been going for several months.
Yeah, actually, the group has probably been in existence formally for, I would say, approximately a year. But the precursor to the group really is kind of grows out of the Oshkosh Can Board. And there was a Can Focus was a kind of an offshoot group from that, which originated some years ago. At the time, there was a kind of a public issues forum on a number of things. One of which was health-related issues and alcohol, tobacco, and drug use. And Can Focus came into being. And what eventually happened is that this Can Focus group, along with the Can Board, evolved into what we now call Breathe Free Oshkosh. And so formally, the name has been around for this group, again, about a year. So.
And for viewers who are unaware, CAN is Confront Addictions Now.
Correct.
Or is it Confront Addiction Now or Addictions?
Plural, Addictions.
Okay,
yes.
Confront Addictions Now, okay.
Yes.
All right. Mel?
Well, we've talked a little bit about how the group started with CAN and then kind of an offshoot with Breathe Free. Kathy, you've been a resident of the City of Oshkosh. You've served on the City Council. You too have been a mayor. I was waiting for Cheryl to say I'm sitting here with two ex-mayors from the City of Oshkosh. Joe, I apologize. I know very little about you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And are you from Oshkosh?
Well,
do you work here?
Yeah, I'm not from here originally,
okay.
but I've lived here for about 10 years now.
Okay.
Prior to that, I lived in Fond du Lac. I worked in Fond du Lac. Mainly what I do is consultation for alcohol, tobacco, and drug-related programs. For most of the last about 15 years, I've worked with school districts, and this past year I was a consultant to the Oshkosh School District employed by CISA 6.
Okay.
So.
And when you say that you're a consultant for tobacco, alcohol issues, when you say that you're employed by CISA 6 for the schools, what do you do? I mean, what?
Well, there's been money that had come through from the state for tobacco programs in schools, and I was hired last year to help coordinate those programs. My official title was Alcohol, Tobacco, and Drug Project Facilitator. And so there were the beginnings of programs, and there had been a number of things done, and I was hired to come and just help get those things moving a little bit faster.
Teaching kids about the ills of using cigarettes?
No, I didn't work with kids directly. I was much more of an organizer. Well, let me take that back a little bit. I did work with students somewhat, but not in the sense of going into classrooms and teaching them. I was more along the lines of organization, getting projects together, helping teachers do things, resources, etc. So I was kind of a person that people would call, to find out about money and the grants, to find out, where certain curriculum materials perhaps were, and I would answer to the best of my ability. So it wasn't a direct hands-on with the students. It was much more in the back.
And this is relevant in part because Joe has had experience with the NENA and the Fond du Lac ordinances, smoke-free restaurant ordinances.
Well,
So he's been very helpful to our group,
I'm still a little
community
confused
volunteer
as to what you did for our schools. You worked as a facilitator of some sort with teachers looking for money. What teachers were using you? Were teachers trying to teach students about alcohol, tobacco, drugs?
Yeah, right. There's a curriculum in the Oshkosh School District called the Michigan Model. One of the things I did, for example, was I did a survey of the teachers as to what the use level of that curriculum was, and to find out if there were needs, if there were materials that the teachers needed, if there were things that could be done to make the teaching of that particular curriculum easier. So again, I was like a resource person.
Okay.
And an organizer.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's just
Sure.
when I ask a question and I'm not sure I'm getting an answer, I just wanted to verify that I understand what it is that, because obviously backgrounds play a big part in what people become involved in and what they think is important, both from participatory as far as your work life, your home life, and extracurricular activities like Breathe Free Oshkosh, which I believe is probably taking up a great deal of both of your time launching these efforts and getting to where you need to go.
Yeah, let me just add that, to make a tie-in to the Breathe Free connection is that my field is public health, and the purpose or the objective of what I do is to reduce the problems associated with the use of alcohol, tobacco, and drugs. So if you, for example, if you want kids to reduce the use of these substances or to not use them at all, you need to have programs in place in the schools, but you also need to have things going on in the community, because kids are actually in the classroom a very small part of their lives, and if what the greater community says or does conflicts with what's being taught in schools, you're not going to have very successful outcomes. So therefore, whenever there are community initiatives which address these issues, alcohol, tobacco, and drug use, I tend to get involved with them because that is all a part of what I do in working with schools.
Okay.
But the schools are not paying me necessarily. They are not paying me to do that. That's more a volunteer.
Okay.
Kathy, earlier this year you had said that you didn't necessarily want to go to referendum, and now it looks like we're moving in that direction.
Yes, we are.
We're definitely going there. What changed or what didn't change that sort of precipitated and moved you folks to go to referendum?
Well, of course, the City Council defeated the proposed ordinance by one vote. Mm-hmm. And we frankly were outraged at that because we felt that we have considerable public support, and 3,500 names and more than 100 people at the public hearing, and many of whom we didn't know. These were not people that we recruited. They were people that cared about the issue. Mm-hmm. So the issue became much larger than our smaller Breathe Free steering committee. And we realized that it wasn't finished, that we needed to continue this. We owed it to the people that had backed us to continue it. And there is this process called direct referendum, which we've not used very much in the state of Wisconsin. But it does work for this kind of purpose, and one needs to gather 15% of the voters' signatures, 15% of the last gubernatorial election, which in this case is 2,822.
That's
A
probably
number that I know.
ingrained on your mind like
Yes.
a burn mark. Huh?
And so if we are successful in gaining these signatures, this will force the city council to do one of two things: either to adopt the ordinance as we have circulated it, or to put that same ordinance on the ballot. And this will likely be on the April 6th.
So it would be the general rather than the primary
Right,
ballot?
the general.
Okay, all right. Do you think, I mean, you had mentioned that the city council could just take the signatures and act on it. Do you see that as happening? I mean, obviously, if it's going to an April 6th vote on the ballot, chances are that's not going to happen, and you're just going to move forward with the ballot referendum then?
It's the city council's prerogative to do
Okay.
what they would like to do. Do I see it happening? Likely not. You know, if they felt they couldn't pass the ordinance the first time, I don't see a majority of council members being willing to back it this time.
But there was Shirley Maddox, who I think took issue with being called the swing vote. I think she even came out in the paper and had some issues with, being contacted and saying, hey, you're the swing gal. I think one of her problems, as she really effectively articulated, is she felt as though there was not enough communication prior to coming to the council as far as compromises or bringing all the parties to the table to try to fashion some sort of ordinance that would work for as many people as possible. Obviously, with two parties that are diametrically opposed, like Breathe Free and the restaurants, and I think that we've kind of seen that where there are some real differences in issues and opinions. But I think her problem is that she didn't feel as though that was done, and I think people felt like Mark Harris had led them to believe that they were going to have a certain amount of time till the next election to kind of fashion this, and then it was going to be brought up during an election cycle, and none of that happened, and then boom, all of a sudden it's kind of on the table. Is kind of how people felt. Can you comment on that? Was it boom right on the table? Did you guys kind of sock them in the shorts and run, or explain to us how this happened? Because that's kind of the impression that we're getting from both the media, talking to the restaurant people, listening to Shirley Maddox talk on how she felt as though there was some gross negligence in how this thing was being put forward. And I'd really like to get you guys' comments on how you feel about that.
Well, of course, we don't think there was any gross negligence. We don't know. Councilmember Mark Harris sponsored the ordinance, and obviously we encouraged him to do so, and we're delighted when he did. But then it became his ordinance, and it became the way he chose to take it through the process. We're, as a former mayor, as you know,
Yes.
we're helpless to influence the internal process. All we can do is behave like citizens, which we are.
Right.
And so we could not direct the course of events.
You couldn't
the
have
other-
slowed him down and said, now wait a minute, Mark, we feel that we need more input from the restaurateurs or the Tavern League because this is really going to affect them. Let's get these people to sit down and really, see if we can't hammer something out.
Well, I think he gave, and I'm not going to speak for Mark, but I
Okay.
believe that he offered them every opportunity to talk to him, to come into the process. The thing that is lost on people is that in other communities, this kind of discussion, dialogue prior to an ordinance vote has never worked. Because as you pointed out earlier, the two sides are pretty well at opposite ends. The Breathe Free Oshkosh wants smoke-free restaurants. Restaurants are willing to do that to a point, but not completely. And so we did then, after the vote failed, we did sit down. I think I challenged the restaurants to come to us and see if we could work something out, and they did, to their credit. And I have to give them credit for that, and I admire them for that. A certain group of leaders came to us and said, can we work something out? And we tried. We really did. We sat down at least 2 meetings and hashed out our differences, and we each moved like this. but we just weren't able to bridge that last little gap. The restaurant people, and I'm not saying that they represented a majority of restaurants, but the leadership that came to us suggested that they would be willing or thought they could get enough restaurants to go along with an ordinance that would ban smoking at all dining tables, but allow smoking at the full-service bar area of restaurants.
And that is what Nina
And
has,
that
right?
is what Nina has, and that's what Fond du Lac has. And so we said, well, we can do this. We understand that this is a move on your part, but we want to see our ordinance or a version of our ordinance implemented at some time certain in the future. X months out, however many months that was, and when the leadership took that back to more restaurants, there was no agreement.
So that was the
so
major
we-
sticking point then, was the fact that the restaurateurs said, okay, we'll eliminate smoking at the dining tables, the full-service bars, excuse me, will still have it, and you wanted to implement a total smoking ban at some point.
We said yes.
They were not willing to do that,
Right.
and there's where you locked
Right.
horns and sort of
Well,
got
we didn't
locked
lock
up.
horns. We shook hands and parted friends, understanding that.
But I mean, that was the sticking point. That's where the negotiations stopped at that
yes,
point?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because we simply couldn't agree.
Yeah, and I'll add that that's why things weren't done prior to the ordinance being introduced. In other words, why we didn't get together with them, because in a sense we knew what the result would be. And the reason is because given the nature of what this issue is about, there really isn't any compromise unless you do it something along the lines as we were trying to fashion. In other words, make the start date somewhere off in the future. And what I mean by that is that in the case of secondhand smoke, I mean, you either ban it or you don't, because given the fact that there's no safe level of use, if you have smoking at the bar, but you don't at the tables, and you don't have a separately ventilated room, you basically are not protecting people. And so that's where the issue lies, and that's why we didn't get together with the restaurants ahead of time. My experience in Fond du Lac, my experience in Nina, both had shown that that simply doesn't work. And so what you do is you fashion an ordinance which is crafted to offer the best protection that you can, and make it then subject to criticism and changes, and that's what we did.
When you say it doesn't work, what do you mean by that, Joe? I mean, what are you basing that, because that's a pretty stern statement. What are you basing that on?
I'm basing it on what I said just a couple minutes ago, that there is no established safe level of exposure. And if you don't eliminate it, either by completely partitioning off with separate ventilation, you're going to get drift, you're going to get the effects, the carcinogens, you're going to get the odor, which isn't the problem, but it's the chemicals in the smoke, the carbon monoxide, etc. You're going to get that drifting over, and it's going to affect people. Some people more than others, some people perhaps not at all, depending on individual vulnerabilities and a host of other things. So you have to eliminate it, essentially. And so that's why the ordinance was crafted the way it was. And whether Shirley didn't understand that, I'm not sure. Maybe we didn't communicate that to her enough. But she felt that it could have been somehow that there could have been a meeting and a compromise ahead of time, but that simply was not going to happen.
Yeah, this doesn't. It hasn't happened in other communities. Restaurants hold out
Well, and
for some reason. I don't quite understand why.
I
because
think there's probably a pretty plausible reason. These are privately held restaurants. They are not taxpayer-operated restaurants,
Right,
and it's their business.
right.
So I think just by a democratic society being what it is, people are thinking, now wait, I should have something to say about how my business is run when I'm paying taxes and I'm following all the rules that are on the board, on the table right now. I'm following the federal rules, the state rules, the local rules. There's no law against smoking. So when you people who don't own restaurants, who aren't legislators, are coming up and saying, we want this banned. No compromise, no talk, this is how we want it to look, boom. I mean, that would make my back stiffen up pretty tight. I
Yeah.
have to tell you.
And that's understandable. But you know, these same kinds of conflicts have occurred throughout the history of public health. You do have private ownership, and that's great. That's fantastic. But the bottom line is that even with private ownership, if there's harm that comes to people who come into that business, for example, because of something having to do with the business, then they should be held culpable. And so, in the case of foodborne illness, for example, construction codes, sanitary codes, all of these are things which are subjected to private ownership. And that's maybe bad in some cases, or at least some people feel that it's bad. But the underlying issue is that trade is a social act, and they are offering to do business with the public, and so they have kind of a contract that if those people or whoever comes into their establishment should not have to decide whether or not to enter based on safety reasons.
But one of the things in your ordinance specifically talks about, and we'll get into more specifics, but one of the things it talks about here is that, and I think it's in the whereases, which are like my least favorite part of ordinances, because you can whereas until you're blue in the face. But I'm trying to find exactly where it says something about, oh, here it is. It's in A under whereas. It is recognized and found that smoking of cigarettes and tobacco products is hazardous to an individual's health and may affect the health of non-smokers when they are involuntarily in the presence of smoking. Since when does walking into a restaurant introduce you to smoke involuntarily if you know it's a smoking restaurant? You don't have to go into that restaurant if you know that they're smoking on the premises. So my whole argument is it's about choices. If people want to have smoking, the owners believe that smoking is fine, and people who patronize that particular restaurant, Restaurant A, and they know that they're smoking, there's nothing involuntary about their act of walking through the door. They know precisely what goes on in that restaurant and voluntarily subject themselves to whatever elements would be in there. And I'm speaking,
as do the employees when they accept a job there.
Correct. And I'm speaking just for smoke, because that's what we're talking about. So I'm wondering why you would envision walking into a restaurant, because you can pick any restaurant you want. We have a lot of them in Oshkosh. Laura's Tortilla Flats, Jeff's on any given night is smoke-free, on Thursday nights is smoke-free. There are choices. You don't have to go into a restaurant where there's smoke.
Right.
There are limited choices. There are very few restaurants that you can go into, and destination restaurants. One where you might want to go with your husband or your family for an anniversary dinner or a birthday dinner, which I wouldn't call a fast food place. Fast food places are smoke-free, but there are very few other restaurants that are completely smoke-free. And
so you guys should start a restaurant.
Since I came to be involved in this issue, I've discovered that there are so many people that have health conditions that literally can't go in. They have asthma attacks, or they're afraid they're going to have an asthma attack, and so they're literally precluded from walking in the door of many of the fine restaurants that we have here in Oshkosh, and we all want to enjoy.
But yet
the
majority of them haven't, even when restaurants have, like Jeff's, have given them an opportunity to. They still haven't. I mean, Jeff's has their business has gone up a little bit on Thursday nights, but not much.
Jeff's told us that the business had gone up 25%.
But they're also offering all the specials that they do all week. So and they've increased their advertising. So it's very difficult to try to figure out, as a marketing specialist, where those numbers are coming from. Is it because they went smoke-free, or is it because they put all their specials on one night so that the non-smokers could come in and feel as though they weren't missing out on anything?
And the 25% equated to 17 people. I mean,
25% is still 25%.
Well, but I'd like to get back to the point that the
I.
voluntary versus involuntary,
Right.
and I understand there are limited choices, but in a democratic society, it does not preclude anyone out there who feels as though that there's a market for smoke-free restaurants from starting more smoke-free restaurants and let the market do what the market's going to do, and then there will be more choices. But this says that people somehow are involuntarily subjected to smoke, but they don't have to go in those restaurants.
Yeah, and I'm not crazy. I would agree with you. The wording is not the best, and I certainly didn't.
Would you like me to help you
fashion
start
that.
striking some of that?
Yeah, maybe
Joe?
so, maybe so. But I will. But I'll get back to the choice thing by reiterating what I mentioned a little while ago, and that is, it is a question of choice. But choice in a democratic society should not be based on safety or health regulation, or the threat to safety and health. So by your logic, why do we have sanitation codes? Why not let, a free-for-all? Why don't we have some people, wear hairnets, others not? Why don't we let a certain number of rodents in, insects? If it's going to cost the people to eradicate these things, why not just let them come in and let the customer be
But
aware?
by your same argument, Joe, then why are we only going after restaurants for smoking? Why aren't you going after taverns? Why aren't you going after motels? Why aren't you going after
That's
bowling
right.
alleys? Why aren't you going
I
after
agree
the
with
alcohol
you.
element in
Because
here?
you do what you can do.
But
And
that's
the
a
alcohol's-
cop-out, Joe.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is, because if you are really concerned about public health and you're saying that rodents, if we just wanted to abolish all safety issues and all health issues, there'd be no OSHA, there'd be no inspections, there'd be no sanitation. But what this really is it's a political movement, because I think you feel as though you've got the wave on your side and you can divide and conquer. You can take this piece of the rock, or at least that's what you think, and maybe the next piece will be the taverns and the next piece will be something else.
That's the way it's always been.
So so you agree to that this definitely could be a divide and conquer maneuver by Breathe Free to take the restaurants first, then maybe move into other segments of the no smoking
Well, I'm not
arena.
sure I would agree with the use of the term divide and conquer.
Well,
You
yeah,
don't
it's
see it
probably
as-
a little
as a
draconian
conquest.
or something. I'm sure people have called you that before.
But yeah, you do what you can, and the fact is that if this issue were to be expanded to taverns and to all workplaces, there just isn't the support politically for that. You have to be. I mean, you can.
So healthcare
you,
only goes just so far, as long as it doesn't affect the big
Well,
business
well,
pocketbook.
Oh, now, Melanie, you know
No,
what
absolutely.
Realistically,
one
it
does what one can do in a political environment,
Right.
in a realistic
But I
world.
think that that's unfair, because it's discriminating against a singular industry when we all know politically that there are pollutants that are poured into our air all the time by big businesses right here in Oshkosh, that we're sucking carcinogens off the back ends of buses and cars and Oshkosh Truck and Leach Company and Morgan Doors. I mean, how much sawdust have these people sucked into their lungs with absolutely no protection? So when we talk about public health issues, one of the biggest public health issues is the fact that people have no health insurance for preventative medicine.
Yeah, absolutely.
That will hit you in the face long before secondhand smoke's ever going to get to you.
Yeah.
So when we have millions upon millions of Americans with no health insurance, secondhand smoke falls kind of far down the line, because how are these people ever going to find out what's wrong with them? They can't even afford to get to the doctor to begin with to have any preventative medicine. But I digress, because that being in
Yes.
healthcare,
You
it
do.
just it irritates me, because I listen to politicians spew forth all of these things that they're going to do, and the bottom line is we don't have health care. But what my problem with this is that, Joe, your background's public health, and you've talked about alcohol, you talk about drugs, and you talk about tobacco. You're going after smoking in only restaurants. You're not going after taverns, you're not going after a lot of other entities that have all the same issues that restaurants do. I want to know why that is, and number two, if smoking's bad for you, how, having the background that you have, when does alcohol get drawn into all
Well,
of this?
the issue with alcohol is very simple, is that the act of you having a drink at the bar does not affect your neighbor.
Unless, of course, you pull off the curb and hit them.
Well, yeah, but again, that's completely different. That's not a passive. That's an act. That's an active act, of a person getting drunk, drinking too much, and then going out and doing something. But the fact is that someone standing at a bar in an enclosed area, for example, or at a table at a restaurant, just by the fact that they're there with the cigarette, they're not actively, going and, affecting the other person's health, but by the fact that they are engaging in a behavior which passively is resulting in chemicals which are known to be noxious and hazardous and dangerous, going and affecting potentially somebody else. That's the difference between that and alcohol. I mean, one thing is passive, the other is active. And in the case of the first part of your question was
Why only restaurants?
oh yeah. Well, again, I think we've kind of answered that. Realistically, this is what you start somewhere, and we didn't start with restaurants as far as originating the idea. This is a movement that has been going on for 20 years, actually. And I don't know for sure if the reasons are these, but I think one of the reasons is because you're looking at a venue where people, increasingly so, are the potential for exposure is great because people do this. People go out to eat a lot. After water and air, it's one of the basic human drives for food. So to locate these regulations at a place where people are going to frequent, they're going to have exposure, I think that's probably why people started with restaurants as opposed to taverns.
And I think they're not
workplaces.
starting with restaurants. Restaurants are about the last. The hospitality industry is about the last public indoor area to continue to have smoking. Airplanes.
Non-taxpayer.
Well, airplanes, one can't smoke.
Again,
arenas.
taxpayers' money's in there.
Well,
way too much.
movie theaters, arenas, performing arts centers. Those aren't all public entities. And so, as you know, malls, shopping malls. I don't think malls allow smoking anymore either in the enclosed area. No one really does anymore because there's been a growing recognition that this is harmful, and smokers are normally a courteous group, I find, and
Thank you.
I really do. And
you.
if we say please don't do this, right around me, you defer to that, and I appreciate that. And so, the last places, indoor places that are really publicly frequented, are restaurants and bars. And so it's not the first place people are going, this is the last place.
But do you plan at some point to go after the taverns then?
Me personally, no.
No, we don't have any immediate
No,
plans
I
for
have-
that, no.
Why?
Because the Tavern League is very strong in Wisconsin, and
So
again,
you'll face opposition that
that's
you
right.
probably can't.
Exactly.
We might not.
I mean,
We might not. And I'm
Well,
hoping that
right.
if we go smoke-free, well, I think we will go smoke-free in restaurants, and then perhaps pressure will be put on bars, public pressure. That doesn't mean that Breathe Free or some political campaign is going to do it.
Mm-hmm. One question I had about the ordinance, it even requires the restaurateurs to remove their cigarette machines. Why? I mean, if somebody wants to buy a pack of cigarettes, they still understand that there's an ordinance in place that they can't light up in the restaurant. But the sale of a legal product, these folks are making money off the sale. And that is more stringent than certainly the one in Neenah. I don't know about the one in Fond du Lac, but what's the purpose behind that? They're selling a legal product.
I thought most ordinances did.
well, I don't
require
know if it addresses
removal.
cigarette machines. I don't
It does
recall
in
that.
here.
It does?
Yes,
Okay.
it does. But I
Who
thought
actually
other
drafted this? I mean,
This, I'm glad you mentioned that because this ordinance is really that ordinance which was almost passed by the City Council as amended. It was the ordinance that was brought in that evening,
Oh, yeah.
and then a couple of 3 amendments were made. That's what this ordinance is. So our group did not set about to write our own ordinance. We thought it would be prudent to use the one that was crafted by 3 at least of the 7 City Council members. So that's where the ordinance came from.
Which 3 city council members helped draft this? Obviously Mark Harris, because he was the sponsor.
Well, we're talking about the people that supported it. Mark Harris and Steve Hentz and Brian Peschel. And Shirley,
Drafted this?
Well, the city
Along with the city attorney?
drafted
the city attorney drafted it, and Mark, they were the originators. I mean, the attorney obviously wasn't, but he assisted Mark in what he wanted to do. And then the night that the ordinance was discussed, as you know,
Right, then the amendments
then
came.
the amendments came, and at least some of the amendments were supported by Shirley Maddox, and so there was a majority, so therefore the amendment was included. And so that's what we've done, is take everything that
It looks like you
got
threw
up
everything
to-
in here, including the kitchen sink.
Well, no,
Well,
it's the
well,
same.
This
It's
is
the
a
same,
very big ordinance compared
it is.
to other municipalities. This is 6 pages long.
Yeah,
And
and I still want to go back to the vending machine
I'm sorry,
issues.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because that, Joe wasn't, it doesn't seem aware of that, and.
No, I missed that,
I
actually.
I
think
knew
that
that was
that
true.
is, I think that that's
Well,
really over the top.
What I can tell you is that it's somewhat redundant in the fact that if you are a restaurant and you do not have a bar area, you cannot have a vending machine anyway, as of state law that was passed probably about 4 years ago. Vending machines are relegated now to, quote, adults only locations. So if you're a restaurant, I mean, so it doesn't apply to a lot of people because they can't have vending machines right now. Now, in terms of a restaurant that has a bar area, I'm not sure why that the vending machine that's relegated already to the bar area would have to be removed. I think the feeling behind it is with the other smoking-related paraphernalia, that it's not going to entice people to light up. Now, you can make an argument, and I would probably agree with it, that it won't, a vending machine. And I would agree with that perhaps to some extent, but I think that's the thought behind it. I don't know for sure. Okay.
Yeah, and this has it's
But
been in other
that's
ordinances.
certainly why the ashtrays are removed, for example. I mean, you don't create an ordinance and say people can't smoke in certain locations and then provide all kinds of ways that it makes it attractive for
Sure,
them
but
to
if
use.
somebody is
So-
on their way out of a restaurant, or they're on their way in, and they know that they're running low on cigarettes, and they don't want to stop at the grocery store or a convenience store on the way home, I mean, that's a very convenient way to buy a pack of cigarettes.
Right.
And it just seems like it's trying to stop people from smoking again, and it's also taking away another source of revenue for the restaurant owner. And it's unfair, I think. Go
Well,
ahead.
I think when I read this stuff, and you know, everybody's like, "Oh God, you can't admit that you're a cigarette smoker," because I think that there's probably going to be some kind of wart or something that's going to be on my face, because you know we are feeling more and more as though somehow we have done something horribly, horribly wrong, or that we're just god awful
Yeah.
people.
That's unfortunate, actually.
Well,
think.
but you know, when you have people coming before the city council saying, you know, that we're rotten people and, you know, you're all going to drop dead because of us, I mean, it kind of sends those messages. Now, as a parent, and as a person who has quit smoking and unfortunately started again, it's not one of those things that you want to suggest people doing. I mean, you know, it is not, you know, you waving the flag, yeah, you know, everybody smoke, everybody light up. Anybody who smokes knows that it's a terrible, rotten habit, and it's really expensive. So, you know, those of you who think that you're going to get into this recreationally, I hope you get a second job. You'll need it. And it's stupid, besides. But nonetheless, we do it. It is a legal substance. I am way over 21. Way over.
Not as far as me.
You don't look
Thank you, Joe. It's not going to buy you any slack on this ordinance, though, I got to tell you.
Shoot.
All I'm saying is that there's got to be a way that both smokers and non-smokers can enjoy space without feeling as though, you know, you kind of feel like the guy in the bubble, like you should be looking at people through glass windows. And I understand smokers. As someone who goes out to eat, I don't like cigarette smoke while I'm eating. I don't appreciate it, and I'm a cigarette smoker. I try very hard, Kathy, as you said, if there's other people around me, I try to be very cognizant of that fact. But sometimes you kind of get to the point where there really is nowhere for you to go. And I think you have to give us our due. I mean, civil liberties are civil liberties. And one of the things that I heard the other night, we were at the Patriot Act, and we were discussing the elimination of civil liberties. And John Nichols from the library quoted someone, and I apologize because I don't know who it is, and it said, any singular encroachment on civil liberties opens the door for more of the same. So as a person who feels as though I have the right to do this, and if I'm courteous, and even if you give me a room, give me a room with a door in a restaurant or a bar, I don't care. I don't have to do it in the dining room. I'll go to the bar if that's where you want me to go, but I think I should be able to do it. The non-smokers know that they don't want to walk into the bar because it's a smoking area. We can all eat smoke-free in the dining area, but I should be able to enjoy and partake in something that I'm paying for, it's legal, and I'm not hurting anyone else where I'm doing it. And this really is just saying, hey, we're going to make it as tough as we can for all of you. Let me tell you, one of the things that I don't like about this, and I didn't like about some of the things that people who came up to the city council when they talked about this, was as though they were the only ones who had rights.
Yeah, but
Well,
I think the bottom line really is though, and to answer your question, I mean, the places, from my perspective, those places where smokers and non-smokers can get together are outdoors on private property, and in a restaurant or a bar or a workplace or whatever that has a separately ventilated room and people choose to go in there.
And we can just talk through glass?
No, people can go in and take their own risk, but that protection needs to be there for the general public. I mean, people can then decide to go into that room or whatever. But again, it gets down to the fact that your right to smoke, now, you do have a right to smoke, but that's superseded by the right of other people not to be harmed by what you do.
By everybody's right to breathe clean air, and I guess that's the bottom line to us, to me, is that everybody, whoever you are, wherever you are, has the right to breathe clean air. And this means outside, right in front of an industry or whatever it is. But we've all got that right, and in public places. And so that's really why I'm behind this, why I'm pursuing it. Not that you don't have the opportunity and the right to smoke, elsewhere, other than in an enclosed public spot where I'm going to be closed in, or other people around me are going to be closed, subjected to the smoke.
But again, my point through all of this is nobody's forced and nobody's subjected. If the restaurant posts, this is a smoking restaurant, this is a non-smoking restaurant, and if you're saying that there is no financial burden, there's no financial losses, then more people will go smoke-free. If there's this many people in the community, market forces will drive voluntarily that more people go smoke-free. So why not just have an ordinance that says if you're going to have a smoking restaurant, you have to post it on the door if you're having a non-smoking restaurant, and then people can make their choices and say, I choose to go in here where there is smoking, I choose to go in here where there's no smoking. Why not leave it up to the individuals to choose what restaurants, and let the individuals, if they feel like myself that I want smoking, I go talk to the restaurateurs and I say, I think you should have smoking in here. And the other people who don't think so, then they petition just like you would to your government that we feel as though. This is so much government intervention, and what I don't like about it is this is not an advisory referendum. This is, we are going to do this. You took it to the council, you gave it your best shot, and the council turned you down. They didn't like your ordinance. Now, if it's by one person, 2 people, 5 people, you lost. Now you're going to direct referendum, which dictates to private industry that even though your city council, your government didn't agree with this, you're going to take it to direct legislation. My difficulty is that
Well, it sounds like you have a difficulty with direct legislation.
I do. I really do, and I'll tell you why. The city of Oshkosh hasn't done a whole lot of referendums, but when we have, it's really kind of a selective kind of thing, and I resent that because when the public was asked, do you want to support the public library? It was an advisory referendum. Large amounts of taxpayers' money was going to be expended on this venture. Resoundingly got the tar knocked out of it. People said, nope, we don't want to spend the money. Legislation, the city council came back and said, but we're going to spend the money anyway. Even when the people spoke, they didn't listen to them in an advisory referendum. But you people are going to go to direct referendum, and these private industries have no recourse. There is no recourse for them. You can dictate the success or failure of a singular industry by virtue of direct legislation, but when taxpayers' money is being spent, the taxpayers have nothing to say about it. I'm trying to understand how this can happen, and we call this a democracy.
Well, I, in some ways, feel the same way you do, that direct referendum is not my preferred method to go about this sort of thing. But we feel so strongly that the majority, 3/4 of Oshkosh adults are in favor of smoke-free restaurants. And to us, it's so logical, that everybody has a right to breathe clean air, and we don't understand why more restaurants haven't gone smoke-free voluntarily. But if the legislation is there, it's an avenue for us, and we think we need to continue as far as we can. I think it'll pass. I'm hopeful it'll pass. I'm hopeful, first of all, we'll get enough signatures. When it gets on the ballot, I really believe that it'll pass. It'll be a spirited campaign, and there'll be lots of pro and con and,
Fur flying
and good
everywhere.
debate. Well, good debate,
Sure.
good honest debate. And then in the end, I'm hopeful it'll pass, and we will see that everything will be just fine at the end of the rainbow. That people will not go out of business.
I'll be sitting in my little backyard somewhere, just all hunched over, hoping nobody's looking over the fence.
There are already at least a couple that I can think of establishments where they would meet the ordinance criteria and you could smoke inside.
And
which ones are they? Do you know offhand?
Yeah, I do, but I don't know if I want to blow an individual restaurant's horn or criticize an individual restaurant.
You had mentioned about the overwhelming majority of citizens in the city who support this, and I wanted to talk for just a minute or two about the poll that was done, but we're running short on time, so we don't have a lot of time to talk about the poll itself. But you sampled something like 400 and some people in the city. Do you think that is truly a fair sampling? Representative sampling?
The way
of
it was done,
63,000
I mean, we
people?
relied on an institution that has done this for many years and is very well thought of, the St. Norbert College Survey Center. I mean, that's why we did it. I mean, we could have sent out our own survey and made some statements based on that. But this is an institution that who knows what the sampling techniques are and knows how to get representative samples, regardless of what the issue is. And so, there's a plus or minus 5% error. And so, it's not perfect, but it's certainly indicative of what we're trying to find out. I mean, it's as good as you're going to get in terms of doing a survey.
So one of the problems that I had with the survey, Joe, and I, throughout my life, I have done some market research work and things like that. There were certain questions on the survey that where one of the responses was it doesn't matter,
right.
And yet the person doing the survey, the pollster, was given a prompt in capital letters, do not read.
Right.
So basically taking away a choice of giving someone an other answer to say, hey, it really doesn't matter to me. I mean, I realize that they could still say that, but I know how these things go. You read the answers, and they're supposed to pick one. I don't think that that's a fair way to conduct a survey.
Well,
I realize you didn't personally conduct it, but
No.
I think that's an improper way of conducting a
Well,
survey, and I think it skews the results.
Well, I don't agree, because the fact of the matter is that when you have a multiple choice survey like this, people are naturally going to gravitate towards it doesn't matter. So if they volunteer that, then people can put it down, and that's the way it typically goes. But if you put that as a choice, you're going to get skewed results, because people,
Not that
especially
you get honest results.
no, because people will, when confronted with a number of choices like that, if they get at all confused or whatever, they're going to say it doesn't matter. Or if they don't want to be on the phone in the first place, they're going to take that answer, which is going to be the most convenient. That's why it's not included in there. It's not just for this issue; it's for most issues. They just simply will not put it on and have people read it, but they will take it if people volunteer it.
But if this is such an important issue, why wouldn't people want to talk to you on the phone about it? If so,
for any number of reasons.
You know how
why don't you want to talk to telemarketers?
Somebody else strange
but
calling
telemarketers
up,
aren't calling me up and talking to me about a passionate issue that I have. If you want to talk to me about politics or the war or a president or local legislators, you want to get somebody on the phone who wants to ask me those questions, I'll give you a pollster and I'll give you all the answers that you want. But I mean, this is not one of those, so would you like to buy a condo in Florida and you just want a trip. This is supposedly supposed to be a hot button issue that is, being talked about. People care a lot about it. Why not just give them all the options? I mean,
well, there's any number. I can't answer that. I guess
well, and
conclusively. There's any number of reasons
survey
why
was
people.
valid. 400 people sampled just the other day. I heard about a survey in the state of Wisconsin that were 400 people sampled
For the whole state.
For the whole state, and that was an adequate sample, scientifically based, because they pick people on the basis of gender and income. And don't ask me how they do it. I mean, don't ask me where they get their data from, but they do this. And
it couldn't be
the
from
Harris
the Cancer
poll.
Society donation list as to who sent
No,
money
no,
to
no,
them.
no.
No, it's random. That's
Random.
the key thing.
And
They're randomly.
the Harris polls, New York Times polls, nationally, sometimes use only 400 people. And scientifically selected, this is adequate. And so the results are there.
We
can
upset-
argue about them, but the results are
We
there.
get upset locally when 10% or 15% of the people turn out to vote. 400 people in a population of over 60,000 is less than what we're seeing for people turning out to voting for our legislators.
Yeah, but
and if they
people
were,
don't-
if they were
People
the
don't vote
first
randomly.
400 people you called, I agree with you. But they weren't. They were carefully selected on the basis of these various factors that pollsters have found over the years.
I just have a real hard time because these are
It doesn't make sense
A
in
lot of the
theory,
same
but-
pollsters who will tell us all the political jargon that we want to hear, and I just think that we have representatives in the city of Oshkosh called the City Council who are called upon to make controversial decisions. You got to say this is probably one of the hotties that they're going to see in a good long time. They voted you down. I don't like government by referendum. I really don't like people being denied choices. I really don't like anything rammed down anyone's throat. I think
doesn't a referendum allow choice? I mean, if
it
it's
does
voted
to a
down, but
certain
you have
segment.
a choice, then you have an option.
But this is not an advisory referendum. It's direct legislation referendum, and there's a huge difference in that.
But it's also not something that's just happens like that. I mean, there are a lot of hoops that you need to jump through in order to get this thing done.
Once the referendum is, let's say the referendum is passed.
And we're running out of time.
Okay,
very quickly,
okay,
so.
real quick. What is the compliance time to this ordinance? What if this should pass via direct legislation referendum?
10 days after publication.
10 days,
That's
boom,
the
the
state
restaurant's
law.
got to go.
That's the state law.
Okay, go ahead.
One real quick question. I realize that you don't have the referendum question worded yet. I certainly hope, and I'll ask you to tell me, is it going to be written in such a way, because the one thing we see historically is referendum questions written in a way
That's
that
right.
is confusing
That's
as
right.
all get out.
It can go either way, and the short answer is we have no idea. We have not even we haven't discussed that, and that's not necessarily even our option.
Right. I think that's the city council's option. Really what the referendum is saying, yes, I would like this ordinance. All
Or
6
could we
pages
get a
of it.
section that says it doesn't matter and they could circle?
So I don't know how the question will be worded on the ballot, but
I don't
the
think
citizens
anyone's going
will
to
be
take the time
voting
to
for
read
the
6 pages, and that's unfortunate.
6 pages.
It's apathy, but I don't think anyone's going to take the time to read
That's
that.
why we have these fact sheets that
But
in
it
a
doesn't
nutshell
set
try to
forth
explain
this.
it.
And
No,
I think that's
but-
the difference. I just wanted to, in closing, I just wanted to say one other thing here. And you can't respond. I mean, you can, but it's about someone who is not here. I was hoping that Don Kuchera was going to be here because, you know, we keep hearing about people needing to and wanting to breathe clean air. And Jeffson Rugby, right after the ordinance failed in August, you know, they started making changes, offering smoke-free dining on Thursday nights. I was in Jeffson Rugby on the 7th of November, which was a Friday night, and who is there but Mr. Kuchera? Now, I realize he's exercising his right to go to any restaurant he wants on any night he wants, but for someone who is so passionately screaming about wanting smoke-free dining, he goes on a night that is probably the busiest night of the week and probably the smokiest as well. And I find that really hypocritical, that he can exercise his choice to dine when and where he wants, but the restaurant owners can't exercise their choice to run their business the way they want, and the smokers can't exercise their free choice to smoke in a restaurant. So we've got a minute or so left if you want to comment
Good luck,
on that.
guys, on that
But,
one. That one's going to be
Well, what
interesting.
I mean,
I'll
it's unfair
I'll
because
simply
Mr.
comment-
Kuchera is not here, but
I'll simply comment by saying that, you know, this wouldn't even be an issue if people who smoke exercise their choice when they go into an enclosed area and know that their action is harming someone else or potentially, or it's at the very least a nuisance, that they should choose not to smoke when they enter those areas. And if that were true, we wouldn't need any of this. See, but, and you know, there's a lot that's said nowadays about personal responsibility, and I think that people who know that they're doing something that potentially harms somebody else should refrain from doing that activity. And yet, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of smokers who don't light up because of that very reason. But there are still so many that do. That's why that necessitates this kind of action.
Yeah, and we don't want to be relegated to third spot. Those of us that don't care for
But
smoking.
neither do we.
No, that's true. And
You
so
know, neither do
we shouldn't be denied our right to go out on Friday evening. You know, if we take our chance walking into a restaurant knowing that it's going to be smoky. But Mr. Kuchera doesn't have a health issue, personal one. I don't have a personal health issue, but a lot of people I know do.
of course,
Well,
would
speaking
you
of-
want to run the risk of being exposed to secondhand smoke and developing one? We have about 30 seconds left. Any closing thoughts very quickly?
Everybody has a right to breathe clean air in public places, and that's why we're doing this.
Okay. And with that, thank you both very much for being here.
Thanks.
And
Fun.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for joining us. We'll see you next time here on Eye on Oshkosh. In the meantime, keep your eye on us because we do have our Eye on Oshkosh. Take care. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.